Welcome to Motor Morphers, where two teams of engineers take two hulking vehicles and transform them into machines capable of doing something completely different. They then pit their morphed motors against each other in an epic head-to-head battle. This week's challenge is all about speed. Can our teams turn two knackered old milk floats into high-speed drag racers? But to get there, the teams have to push themselves to the absolute limit.
Let's make some milk float history!
It's a challenge that'll sort the full fat from the semi-skim. The challenge: two teams, 4 days to transform a couple of 2-ton, 10-mile-an-hour milk floats into tyre-smoking dragsters. Who's got the bottle to deliver a race-winning performance? Milk floats are brilliant for delivering your daily pinter, but aren't normally known for their raw speed. But in just 4 days, the teams will bring their morphed machines to this drag racing track for a tyre-shredding head-to-head challenge. Time to meet the teams who'll be taking on this week's mission. Leading the red team is Prince of Pressure, Steve Garforth. Steve teaches hydraulic and electronic engineering and is splendidly obsessed with engines.
Sometimes I wonder who's the biggest, the machine or the Prince of Pressure.
On Steve's team for this week's Motor Morphers challenge are top engineering type blokes Khalil, Gary and Robert. Blue team captain is Ed, the Professor Rycroft. Ed develops performance handling technology for a well-known car firm, and he's got a head for speed.
In this game, brain power equals horsepower.
Ed's backed up by another engineering A-team: Jeremy, Neil and Brian. Time to face the machines they'll be morphing. Teams, your challenge this week is to build tyre-torturing, high-speed dragsters. You want to see the raw materials you've got to work with?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, bring it on.
I'm dying to know.
Gentlemen, say hello to your milk floats!
I can see him pushing it.
Oh,
So come on, say hello to your rides. These little beauties aren't known for their speed. It's clear our teams are going to have a tough week ahead of them. According to the Motor Morphers rules, they must reuse as much of the original machines as possible. But I'll give each team a £500 kitty to spend on extras.
We're sussed it, boys. This is going to be where the winning seat is when we fly past the line, yeah?
All right, gents. Inspection time is over. Come and join me. The winning team is going to be the ones with the quickest vehicle in a head-to-head winner-takes-all drag race. What I want to do now is I want to focus you on the task ahead. So I've organised a little something so you can understand the problems involved in drag racing, all right? Okay. Off you go. The art of drag racing is to put the power down early and launch your car off the start line. The fastest top-fuel dragster takes less than a second to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. This is the team's only chance to see how these cars are built and what makes a winning dragster.
I think the key is getting it light, isn't it?
Putting nitrous on the engine is like, you know, putting a bomb on the engine.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
If you don't use it properly, then it's going to go off.
the launch is the key to all this.
Motor Morphers HQ is run by master engineers Mark and Hadrian, who supervise the builds. With the guys doing their research, I caught up with Hadrian.
This is actually a very difficult challenge because we're asking them to turn those milk floats into dragsters. The steering's not cut out for it, the brakes aren't cut out for it, the suspension isn't cut out for it, and nor is the power.
So what is it specifically about drag racing, you know, the standing start, that's going to affect the design of these milk floats?
They need to work out where the weight's got to be and how much power they need to actually accelerate that vehicle.
So now the teams know the crucial issues they need to take into consideration. It's time to start planning their races. They've got just 4 days to turn their mild-mannered milk floats into demon dragsters.
Ditch a whole load of cells, get a load of weight off, reposition the cells we've got, get a driver more in the middle.
We might be able to flog these off or even do a barter for an engine or a car.
Steve's milk float batteries don't work, so it's no surprise that he plumps for a non-electric solution. It's off to the blackboard so he can talk me through it.
We're going to retain the smaller front wheel we got at the moment.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring them back wheels right out so as we can make it look a little bit mean at the back. So we're going to have a large wheel at the back somewhere. The batteries are going, the motor's going. Try and buy ourselves an engine, which we're going to pop in the middle of the car with a small transmission at the back of it.
So transmission there.
Yeah, and an engine in this area here.
OK, there.
Brilliant. That means that we can get this power straight down to the original diff. And a new steering wheel that comes up down to the back of the car.
Yep, right across there.
So we're going to have to sit somewhere about here. And this thing is going to be mean.
So we need some protection, right?
So we're going to throw ourselves a roll cage over the front. So, engine, auto, diff, win.
While Steve's boys are getting stuck in, Ed, the professor, is studying all the angles. Perhaps Mr. High Tech won't be daunted by an electrical challenge.
First thing we're going to do is we're going to shed all the weight out of that thing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to increase the size of the rear wheels.
So slightly smaller front wheel?
Yeah, absolutely, slightly smaller.
OK.
Currently the motor is quite heavy, it's in the middle. We want to position it on the back.
Oh, motor at the back?
Yeah, to get as much downforce on the rear axle as possible.
Where are the batteries going to go?
They're going to have to sit just in front of the rear wheels.
OK, out there.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So we're going to put the driver as far back in the car as we can, just before the rear wheels. Yeah, about there, yeah. And then obviously some steering too, so we can actually steer the car into position.
I like it. And what about a body kit or some form of aerodynamics?
And we're going to go with a bit of a Le Mans style thing.
I like it!
Absolutely. So a little bit of a swooping, aesthetically pleasing curve, just hide all the sharp edges, and a driver's head sticking up through the top.
Sort of like that?
That sort of thing.
Oh, man, I want to drive that! It's the end of day one, and the teams have only 3 more days to morph their humble milk floats into working drag racers before they face off on Challenge Day. Listen to that. The sound of progress. They're ripping into those milk floats. I actually feel quite sorry for the little vehicles. Having said that, milk float to dragster? Really? Coming up, the Blues are on full charge.
You know what? It's got a bit of go to it.
While the Reds aren't.
So have you ever taken an engine out as slow as that? Only once. But I was dreaming.
Welcome back to Motor Morphers. On this show, 2 teams of engineers take a machine and transform it into something completely unexpected. This week they're starting off with a pair of full-fat milk floats and turning them into drag racers. By which I'm not, of course, talking about men dressing up as women, you know. Although there's nothing wrong with that. You know, in fact, it can actually be quite liberating. I've said too much, haven't I? Steve's team have decided to go with good old internal combustion for their piston-powered projectile, whereas Ed's live wires have chosen to juice up the existing electric motor and transform its pathetic pedestrian performance into something truly electrifying. When they're done, they're going to line up at the start of a drag strip best of 3 rings. The teams get just 4 days to morph their machines.
We've got the main cover off of the back. First thing, top priority, got to get the batteries out.
Steve's top priority is to strip the frame right back to make room for their engine.
We're going to clear off all the rubbish and the mud guards, clear off the subframe on the bottom here, so we'll end up with a bare chassis. And from the bare chassis, we're going to build magic.
Khalil is more used to working with computers than heavy machinery.
I was using this to try and cut the bolts off that cockpit there, but it's a bit thin, so I asked him if I could use this bad boy instead.
On Motor Morphers, the idea with the teams is that everybody's supposed to bring a different set of skills. Steve might have his work cut out this week.
What on earth? It drives down! Now that'll do you a new line. Alright,
let's do that.
Look, that's the one you got to follow, so don't go below that line, else there'll be a penalty.
On the plus side, Khalil has been keeping the red team supplied with plenty of tea.
What's your background? What are you up to?
Well, I'm doing a PhD right now. I'm in my final year and I'm working on fuel cells, so it's all computer modeling, but mathematical models.
Have you done any welding or any fabrication of any sort in this sort of environment?
Never. Never in this sort of environment. I've been in workshops at university, but it's completely different. We have lathe machines, but we don't have anything to this scale.
I'll let you get back to it, dude, because it's going to get cold.
Thanks for that.
All right, man. Good luck, though, yeah?
Thanks, dude.
Cheers. So he can't weld, can't fabricate. Do you know what? It doesn't matter because he's gorgeous.
Ed's blue team have also got big plans for their milk float. But first, he needs to find out what they've got to play with.
Right, OK. So we're going to do a quick road test with the car as it is, or with the milk float as it is, and then start disassembling it.
You know what? It's got a bit of go to it.
Speed by ear, isn't it?
To test the motor, they're going to time how long it takes the float to travel 40 metres.
But stops. Brakes all right.
So 0 to 40 metres in 10 seconds. A decent drag car does 0 to 400 metres in that. So we've got some way to go.
We can tweak it.
We can tweak it, but I tell you what, you know, the launches pretty well.
Yeah, pulls like a train.
Pulls like a train. Unfortunately, it is one.
Yeah, so it's weighs about as much.
So ditch some weight, this thing might actually be able to shift.
Now they know a bit more about their milk float, it's time for the morphing process to begin.
But first thing first, batteries out, start stripping some weight out.
The batteries weigh half a tonne each, about the same as the whole team.
Just don't break the chains over the batteries.
Everything else that isn't absolutely essential gets the chop.
So obviously you'd like to get the whole front cab off. Yep. Let's do this. Go on, Neil.
With the cab in pieces, I caught up with aerospace engineer Neil, who's more used to working on aircraft than milk floats.
Go on, Neil. I wasn't going to hug you, mate, just in case you set fire to my jacket.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
So, OK, look, I'm looking over there, all right, and Team Blue seem to be sailing right now.
We are.
You've basically disassembled the float. You've got it into its constituent parts. Do you know how to put them back together again? What's your plan?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got rid of everything we don't need, lost all the weight.
Yeah.
We think we've got pretty much every single bit we need to put it back together and get exactly what we want. It's looking really good at the moment. We're flying.
Each team gets a kitty of £500 to spend on extras. Ed's boys are keeping the original electric motor, but are buying extra batteries and a replacement rear axle. Steve's team have forked out for new tyres.
1 metre. 1 metre.
That's what I'm talking about.
Look at that. Right, let's get these big babies in.
And blown the rest of their budget on a wrecked Reliant scimitar so they can strip it for its V6 engine.
Come here, boys.
Whoa.
Look at this.
Oi,
Look at this. Have that
Yeah, it needs a bit of body work.
It's not that bit that I'm interested in. It's this bit. Ooh, V6.
That's what I'm talking about.
V6. This, boys, is what's going to power us to the glory.
I think that is a stunning looking car. That's going to be some job to get the engine and gearbox out of that.
For Steve's sake, let's hope Mystic Ed can't actually see into the future. But the scimitar Hadrian's brought them is 35 years old, and he hasn't actually checked that it goes.
We're going to give the engine a go now, see what's happening. So, where are we then, Robert? You got your battery?
Done my hot wiring trick on the steering column.
You didn't do that as a boy, did you?
No, no.
That should be good enough for that. Give her a go.
Okay.
Oh dear, Steve has spent all his money on a car that doesn't work. Robert makes sure that electricity is actually getting to the engine, while Steve and the lads get busy with the dragster-style rear wheels.
Right, that's them 3 nipped up for you. And if he does 2 like this, it's going to be one smooth ride.
The boys then transfer their attention to the ailing engine.
OK, go on then. We're going to have a bit more backwards.
Robert's persistent tinkering pays off.
High five.
While Steve and his team are getting on down to the roar of their V6, the blue team are quietly discovering just how worn out their Milk Float's electric motor is, which is a shame, because it's the only one they've got.
Here is one knackered bearing. It's dry as old bones and feels like it's got sandpaper going around inside it. So we need to see if we can replace that or bring it back to life somehow.
Brian has also spotted a major problem. The carbon brushes, which carry the current to the motor from the batteries, are in a terrible state.
You can see this, which is a carbon brush which is broken. We need to fit this in that. So we just have to modify this and put that on there.
So I think without Brian and Jeremy, it would have been totally scuppered.
Leaving the guys in the workshop, I took Hadrian down to the racetrack, where in just 2.5 days' time, our teams will be racing their Milk Float dragsters. So, H, what do you think about Ed's strategy of keeping not just any electric motor, but the electric motor from an old Milk Float?
I think it's a good idea, but there's a few things he's going to have to address. He's going to have to make sure that the end of the motor where the brushes make contact and pass the power through, that has been remachined perfectly flat, because if there's any wear in it and the brushes don't fit very well, then he's going to get, basically he could end up with just a massive spark in there, because he's going to put in another 48 volts. So it's another massive shunt of power that motor's not used to.
And it's a lot of weight, isn't it, from the battery?
That's a tremendous amount of weight. They're going to have in excess of 1.25 tons of batteries.
That's incredible. What about Steve's team? They're going to transplant an internal combustion engine into a Milk Float. Is that heavy?
It does bring a weight consideration, but nowhere near as much as the electric car. I mean, for instance, the engine and gearbox is lighter than just one of the packs of batteries in Ed's car.
Back at Motor Morphers HQ, Ed and Neil are reconfiguring their Milk Float chassis.
We're stripping, doing the styling, making it look beautiful. Should we pull it so these bits lines up with that? Yeah.
It's not exactly the Le Mans style Ed was going for.
It's not quite how I pictured it in my mind. No. It looked much more beautiful in my mind. What a pilot.
Brum, 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 brum. Anyway, it's now late afternoon and Steve is anxious to get the engine out of the scimitar.
I think we need to crack on and cut this body at the back now.
There's only a few bolts hold that body on. And all I got to do is just nip those bolts off, rip the body off, and that's it. It's all there, right in front of them. Bish bosh, out, in.
It should be straightforward, but first they have to actually find the bolts.
I think the bolts for this are underneath here. Feed that out the window.
Hadrian and Mark are mystified by their approach.
So have you ever taken an engine out as slow as that?
Only once, but I was dreaming.
Oh, you was dreaming?
I was dreaming.
It is painful, isn't it?
No, it's very painful.
Look comfy in there, man. I'm too old for this. Very technical now. I'm too old for this.
So as day 2 draws to a close, Steve's team can't find the bolts.
There's some sort of catch or something.
The engine's stuck in the car, and their Milk Float morphing mission is turning sour. Let's hear from Hadrian, engineering's very own Len Goodman.
Well, it's an interesting day, isn't it? The blue team have sort of got on with it. The electric motor's been apart for quite a while now and still coming apart. Stevie G's build, there was no sense of urgency, and there's no sense of urgency about getting the engine out. I mean, they're basically taking everything else off the car and leaving the engine and gearbox in at the moment.
Day 3, and the teams now have only 48 hours to go until the race. Ed's team are impatient to crack on.
So, when are we getting our axle?
About 12 o'clock.
OK, and what about our batteries? Do we need time to plumb them up?
No, you didn't tell me to order them.
Shut up.
Can I do that?
Oh, yeah, please. All right.
How many double A's do you want?
AA batteries?
Yeah.
AAA batteries, I think.
You want triple A's?
Yeah.
If we can get about 20,000 of
Yeah,
them.
20,000 of them, that'd be lovely.
Good.
With all that electricity on tap, what could possibly go wrong?
In this particular case, it's actually vulnerable to too much power going through it. So it's an unknown entity at the moment, whether the contactors will actually be able to handle all that current. And until we test it, we don't know.
And it's the big moment for the blue team's refurbished milk float motor.
So basically, we're just going to use the power drill to turn the motor over for a little while to let the brushes cut themselves in. Or else what we're going to do is if we try and get it running under its own power straight away, it'll damage the brushes again and we'll be back at square one.
They're hoping the motor can handle the huge increase in power required to shoot their dragster off the line.
That sounded better already.
It's time to get that made-over motor hooked up to some serious battery power. Let's hope Jeremy and Brian have got it right. If it goes bang, there's no plan B.
Give it a 12 volts first. So, 3, 2,
Yeah, then knock it back.
1. It works.
Bye-bye. Coming up after the break, it's Axel Gate for the blue team.
It might snap in half, but if it works, we might get 70 miles an hour.
And Hadrian gets heavy with the Prince of Pressure.
We're going to be totally honest with you now, Steve, right? I think that is dangerous.
Welcome back to Motor Morphers. This is the show that's half soap opera and half engineering game show. It's a bit like Bullseye, but with a few tears and lots of welding. This week's challenge is to take a humble milk float, like this one, and convert it into a tarmac-chewing, rib-snorting drag racer. Ed's team are going to be using some electricery to enhance their float's existing electric motor, whereas Steve and the boys are going to be cooking on gas, by which I actually mean petrol. And you know what? With all this talking, I can't remember whether Deirdre at number 13 has semi-skimmed or full fat. It's lunchtime on day 3 of the build, and Steve's team are still struggling to get the engine out of their 35-year-old Reliant Scimitar. The red team's plan is to power their dragster with the Scimitar's V6 engine, but they're massively behind schedule.
I think we can only say that yesterday didn't quite go as we wanted it to. I mean, it's not an issue that's a disaster. It's just literally put us an awful long way behind time.
By the end of today, Steve's hoping to have the engine mounted and the steering sorted. But first, they've got to get it out.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to use gas and set fire to it and just let you win soon. This car is an absolute nightmare.
And they still can't find the bolts holding the engine in place.
Just trying to take the prop shaft off so as we can pull the engine out. Jesus Christ! Where's that cloth?
Master engineer Hadrian, who's supervising the builds, can't believe what he's seeing.
That is as painful can be. I've never known anybody take a car apart to get an engine out. It's just absolutely bonkers.
Just cut the chassis through either side.
So was relieving the chassis.
No thought gone into it whatsoever. It's a joke. It really is a joke. It's just I've never seen anything like it.
Finally, they find the hidden bolts.
We found the reason for our troubles. Somebody in the past has retrofitted a tow bar, and there's a row of bolts hidden in the glass fibre section along the back.
5 long hours after they started. And after a final attack with gas axes, Steve's team get their hands on the prize.
Okay, you're ripping them out. Carry on. I need rubber. Well, that wrecked the gearbox, man.
Right, we finally got the engine out, yeah. Look, there it is, in all its open glory. We've really got to just pull our finger out now because we are way behind, but it's out. It's out.
At last, Steve's team are ready to fit the engine to the dragster, but it's still attached to part of the Scimitar's chassis, and they're planning to put it on top of the existing milk float chassis. By my reckoning, that's one chassis too many.
Looking good. Starting to come together again. These holes do line up, don't they? Yeah, that looks bloody good to me.
Steve's team are massively behind. And Hadrian's seriously concerned about their build.
So they've cut that engine out of the old Scimitar and left it on its chassis and thought, you know, well, oh, we'll just lower it in. Oh, look, it touches and weld it on. And it's like no thought into it whatsoever. It's ridiculous. All they've got to do is cut down the engine mounting, throw the chassis away, and the engine mountings will actually drop straight onto the milk float chassis. It's absolutely made to go in there. It's perfect. But now, Steve, I'm baffled. Totally baffled. Why haven't you cut those brackets off and just sat those brackets straight on the milk float chassis? 60 miles an hour, the twist in that chassis would be massive.
Now you pointed out, it's too late to change it now, though. It won't get done.
All you got to do is snip these welds around that bracket and then lower the whole thing down.
This will not be done by tomorrow, if that's the case. I mean, if you're telling us to move it down, we will, but be prepared, it won't be done.
And we're going to be totally honest with you now, Steve, right? I think that is dangerous, that centre of gravity on that axle. Because this is going to offer you next to nothing in stability. I would not let you go down that raceway with this, all right? You're going to have one of my men for a bit. It'll be sorted now. Okay.
Because they've wasted so much time removing the engine, they're now really up against it. Hadrian's assistant Jack gives them a helping hand, taking out the unwanted piece of chassis.
Jack, bar that over again. I think it moves, mate. I'll hold it over whilst you tack it in.
Steve is forced to take a back seat, while his team's mistake is put right. He's taken a big hit, but he's not nearly ready to admit defeat.
By dinner time, soon after dinner tomorrow, we will have this car where we're starting to think we're going to turn the key. So at least we can then see if this baby runs.
Fantastic. Looks like a sterling job you've done there.
Ed's boys have refurbished their milk float's old motor and are hoping it'll give them enough oomph to power their dragster. They've also reshaped their chassis into something they hope will be a bit more aerodynamic than a milk float. Time to take delivery of their new axle. It's from a transit van, and they're hoping it'll get them some really impressive acceleration.
Okay, so you're going to start from there? Start from there.
The milk float's axle turned the wheels for every 11 turns of the motor. That's a ratio of 11 to 1. The guys are hoping the new axle will turn the wheels with just 3 turns of the motor, giving them a much faster launch.
5.5 to 1. Seems all right, doesn't it? So we just had a check. The ratios were a bit further out than we expected. We were hoping for a 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, but this looks a bit higher than that. It does limit our top speed. Is that a 5 to 1 ratio on there?
On there?
Yeah.
It's 5 to 1, is it?
About that, yeah.
I don't know, I just got the axle you asked for.
Well, I thought we asked for a 3 to 1, so between 2 and a 3 from the scrapyard.
You asked for a diesel transit rear axle. That is a diesel transit rear axle.
Day 3's nearly over, and Ed's got a big problem. The transit axle will limit their acceleration. The only other spare axle from Steve's Scimitar has a ratio of just over 3 to 1. It will give them the speed, but might not be strong enough.
It'll be fine.
Which will be fine? Having the...
Put your Scimitar axle on.
Well, I don't know, will we? Yeah, I know you... I know you're not so sure.
We put the Scimitar axle on, it might snap in half. But if it works, we might get 70 miles an hour. It's sort of the only option. It's not a brilliant one, but it's the only one.
The Scimitar axle's going on. Yeah. And stick it on.
Ed's team decide to risk it all and go with the Scimitar axle, and it comes out a lot quicker than the engine did. It's the end of day 3. With just one more day to go until the big race, there's still a whole lot to do. It's the last day of the transformation, and our teams have just 24 hours to get their vehicles finished and on the starting grid here at the Shakespeare County Raceway, where they'll tear down this quarter-mile drag strip as if there's a pan of milk about to boil over at the other end. And you know how messy that can get. They'll have 3 races, and so this will be as much about consistency as it is raw speed. Back at Motor Morphers HQ, Hadrian wastes no time piling on the pressure.
Steve! Hey, you reckon you're going to get there by the end of the day, mate?
We're going to have to get there by the end of the day, mate.
Yeah. You've got to get there by the end of the day, that's it.
After yesterday's big push, Steve's team need to get the engine working, fix the steering and finish all the fabrication.
This is one of those last touches that makes it feel so much cooler. This is spot on. Oh yeah, we're good.
Right, let's get this measured because I'm going to want you to get a drag strip, straight line.
Steve.
Jay.
How you doing, man?
Morning.
Great to see you. Look at the sweat on you, man.
I know.
Damn, you're working hard.
I know. I'm going to die a few years younger, I think.
You know what? Look at it, though.
Looking good, ain't she? Looking good. Really looking good.
It looks like a thoroughbred racing machine, man.
It's not been all sailing smooth, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get there.
That hurt. All the way down to my belt.
Having got off to such a storming start, Ed's build seems to have slowed down to milk float speed.
All right, fella.
How you doing,
Yeah,
Jason?
good. So this is it, man. This is the last day, the final run before the big one tomorrow.
The final push, absolutely.
Do you feel that pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole team is feeling it properly today.
You've got, what, 8 hours left today? This is crunch time.
Yeah.
Are you behind schedule? Are you where you wanted to be?
No, we are behind schedule. We really wanted this in last night, but the team have done a fantastic job in rebuilding this whole motor. About 50% performance improvement.
You seem busy. You're talking at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, I know. I haven't got time. We've got to get on.
You want me out your face, don't you?
Basically, yeah. Sorry, mate.
Go on, then, get on with it.
Cheers.
Mid-morning and the motor and axle are ready to be fitted. But gambling on the Scimitar's axle holding up is making everyone very nervous.
The electric motor, what we fitted, we've made it 50% more efficient. It makes out just over 1,000 pounds of torque. That's massive, 3 times more than an F1 car. It's huge. The problem we've got now is a slight weight axle. It might just screw it all up.
So on the one hand, the Scimitar axle is a saviour for Ed's team, but it's also brought its own sort of problems. Mainly that it's not designed to cope with the kind of torque that their electric motor is going to deliver. You know, it could literally be ripped out of its housing. So, potentially, they might have to push start their dragster. It's crunch time. Jeremy and Brian have spent 2.5 days revitalising their electric motor. Time to slot it into the race car and see if it works with that untested axle. Understandably, Jeremy seems a bit nervous.
Yeah, everybody clear?
Oh, you must be chuffed to bits to see that.
But Brian's been here before.
Hang on. Sounds like a winner to me.
With just a few hours left, Ed's team have a working car, but no body, whereas Steve's team seem to have gone for the opposite strategy.
Basically, we're 3/4 of the way through the final build day, and she's done, effectively.
Even Khalil's got to grips with the circular saw and gets busy fabbing their float.
The chances of having the time to be able to do something like this was absolutely not even thinkable yesterday. But now I'm talking about making cosmetic alterations to the cabin. Wow, man, we've pulled this out the bag.
All right, D-Day is tomorrow. Are the teams where they need to be as far as you're concerned?
Not quite. There's a few wrong choices. I wouldn't have gone for the Scimitar axle on the electric car. It's just not designed remotely for the amount of power that's going into it.
What about Steve's team?
I'd sooner handle a wardrobe around a house single-handed than drive that. Because it's going to handle about the same, I reckon.
It's going to be a good race, isn't it?
It's going to be an interesting race for sure.
With time running out, it's Steve's turn to do the all-critical engine test. It's been an epic saga getting the thing out of the Scimitar and into the float, but after all that, will it actually work?
So, whenever you're ready, we're going to give it a go. The fuel will get up there in a minute.
Wearing a red overall right now, that is a symphony.
Neutral,
Listen to that V6 hum.
Stop. Superb. We go through heartache, we go through blood and tears. My fingers and my hands last night felt as though they'd gone through a shredder. But you know what? We are ready for race day.
With time running out, Hadrian helps Ed's team put the final few pieces of their dragster together. Both teams have now had help, so they've both escaped getting a penalty. Well, they're doing the final touches, but I think they're just about there. And you know, this has been a funny one, because at various times during this challenge, I've not been that sure that either of the teams are going to get to the finish line, or should that be the start line before the finish line? Now, though, they're looking pretty ship-shape. The question, in my mind, now becomes, which is it going to be, blue or red? Electric or piston power? At various points, I've thought I could call it. Right now, though, it could be anyone's. It's challenge day, and two mild-mannered milk floats have been morphed into mental drag racers. Ed's team have juiced up their electric motor with 12 times its original power, while Steve's team have slotted in a thumping great V6 engine. But to finish first they'll have to finish. Go! Well, challenge day has finally arrived, and our two teams have been working incredibly hard over the last 4 days, attempting to transform their modest milk floats into tarmac melting machines. They've cursed, they've cried, they've drunk toxic amounts of tea, and all for this extreme engineering challenge. Finally, the moment of truth has arrived. Ed's Blue Boys started out with this far-from featherlight float. They beefed up the batteries to 12 times their original power and fitted a potentially troublesome lightweight axle. Steve's Reds switched entirely from electricity and opted instead for good old-fashioned internal combustion, with a 3-litre, 140-horsepower V6. The start line beckons, but this challenge is as much about survival as it is speed. Both cars have to last for 3 races, and both cars have issues. The Reds have got an overheating engine and will have to start it at the very last second, or they'll blow the cylinder head gasket, while the Blues have a lightweight axle and lots of torque that could easily snap it in half. And I'm wondering, what does Hadrian think about all this?
I think it stands a good chance of actually going bang. It's a bit of a shame, really. Yeah, the back axle's a grey area. Can it actually take that power? There's electrical areas which are now being properly overloaded, and you know everything is absolutely on its absolute limit, and anything could happen there. Properly, anything could happen in that car.
Ed's motor now produces so much extra power, Hadrian's worried it could destroy their back axle. So they'll have to do a very unconventional push start. I'll start the race as they cross the line. Well, gentlemen, this is it. You have sweated blood for this moment. You realise that right now you carry the hopes and the dreams of dairy delivery people across Britain. Yeah? Jeremy for Team Blue, you up for this, my friend? Let's chest 5 and do it real, all right? Come here, big man Robert, in for the real deal. Mount your vehicles, my friend, strap in, and let's make some milk float history. Today's Motor Morphers Challenge comprises 3 drag races, each taking place over an 1/8 of a mile. First to charge off the line for the blue team is the original electric warrior, Jeremy. Aerospace engineer Robert goes for the Reds, hoping that their dragster will go off like a rocket. So, it's go, go, go! Eventually. Good! That was such an exciting race! It's a win for Ed's blue team. I'm not sure if Robert's being cautious here, saving the red team's engine for 2 more races, or if he's flat out. I guess we'll see. But as our next pair of drivers prepare for the second race, it's obvious Ed's worst fears have been realised.
What is going on?
Okay, so basically, the amount of torque it's producing in the first race has caused the rear axle to rotate backwards.
Is that why that's kinked there?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's why the shot's all over the place. So what we've got to do is try and straighten it out again, or else that rubber donut coupling could very well tear apart.
This blue one there?
This big lump of blue rubber. If that tears apart, then we've got no drive, and it's the end of the race for us.
This is potentially catastrophic if you don't get this nailed.
Yeah, because we don't have a spare one with us.
So what plans have you got?
We're going to try and undo the bolts which hold the axle onto the suspension springs.
Yeah.
Roll the axle back into position, tighten them up again, and then we'll give it another go.
Oh, good luck, man. Good luck.
Thank you.
In true bulldog spirit, the teams join forces to help patch up the Blues dragster. It's not a perfect solution, but the race must go on.
All right. That's very good, actually.
Gentlemen, take your positions. Round 2, and Neil is carrying the hopes and fears of the whole blue team on his shoulders as he lines up against Khalil, who's got worries of his own.
You feel it, then you go for it.
Yeah. It seems the red team's starter motor is still playing up. Go!
That was a drive, man. There was a bit of mockery going on. Did you see? I think Khalil was doing a little bit of on the man. It's spectacular stuff. And the great thing is, it's all hinging on this last of 3 races, isn't it?
Yep.
This is it, the decider. 1 race over 1/8 of a mile. Ed's team have 12 times their original power, but a fragile axle. Steve's team have a temperamental, overheating V6. One thing's for certain, it's blue versus red. Electric v internal combustion engine.
Godspeed, Brian.
For the Blues, former TT racer turned sports motor engineer Brian is taking the wheel.
Right, we're going to pick your position, OK? Ready?
While for the Reds, former motocross racer turned agricultural engineer Gary will be trying to deny him victory.
Cool.
Go! And it's Brian for the Blues who gets a great start, with Gary for the Reds left standing. But here he comes. His experience really pays here, and he charges to victory.
Conclusive to me. It does.
In that final race, Gary covered the 8th mile in 12 seconds dead. Awesome acceleration for what was once a humble milk float.
Well, gentlemen, what can I say? That was so exciting. The only thing wrong with those races was that I wasn't in one of the cars. The first race, Ed's team went over the line first. Yeah, well done, guys.
Good man, good man.
And in the second race, it was Steve's boys over the line first. Well done to you, sir. And after the third race, it was Steve's team. Well done, boys.
So it's a gold top victory for Steve's team of Milk Float Morphers, and only silver top for Ed's boys. But both teams really delivered.
Join us next time when, once again, the boundaries of engineering excellence will be pushed to their limits and beyond. Run, run, run. You get the idea.
Next